Desculpem, estou com o microfone ligado, ótimo. Desculpem, mas isto é mais ou menos o mesmo quando dão assim uma boa guloseima a uma criança. Obrigada, Herman, foi absolutamente extraordinário. Bom, agora a sério, muito bom dia. Que bom que é ver esta sala, que bom que é ver esta sala cheia, ver as vossas caras. Temos todos cara novamente, não é? Queixo, a gente já não se lembrava bem. Que bom que é ver os vossos sorrisos. Depois desta fantástica abertura do Herman, tudo o que eu não posso tentar fazer é ter graça, porque vai ficar sempre patético, não é? Aliás, vocês devem se lembrar como é que terminou o 6º Encontro de Produtores da APIT, no dia 5 de março de 2020. 5 de março de 2020. Estávamos a cerca de uma semana, dimos todos recambiados para casa. E o que é que eu fiz? Despedi-me de vocês e disse obrigada a todos e não se esqueçam de lavar as mãos. E senti-me o máximo. Vocês riram-se, eu ri-me e depois deu nisto. Portanto, hoje revela-se só uma má piada e ao mesmo tempo vocês de facto não lavaram as mãos. É isso que se prova depois do que temos vindo a passar. Bom, eu queria obviamente começar por cumprimentar as pessoas, todos vós aqui presentes, mas como sabem eu começo sempre por cumprimentar as empresas associadas da APIT. Muito obrigado por estarem aqui presentes, porque o encontro é sempre feito a pensar em vocês, naquilo que vos pode interessar, naquilo que é para vocês fundamental ouvir e conhecer. E portanto hoje já somos 40 e mantemos-nos fortes e unidos. Não se esqueçam que essa união é absolutamente fundamental para continuarmos a ter notoriedade e a sermos reconhecidos. Incluo aqui uma vez mais o agradecimento à SOS TV, ao Paulo Feliciano, que está a fazer esta transmissão em streaming para o site da APIT. Cumprimento quem nos esteja a ver do lado de lá e, portanto, saibam que esta emissão, a partir de agora, está a ser transmitida. Cumprimentar Luís Silveira Botelho, Inspetor-Geral do IGAC, a representação do Sr. Ministro da Cultura, Anico Bilreiro, Hugo Figueiredo, administrador da RTP, administradores da SIC, se calhar faltou-me a mim não ter visto, cumprimentar Luís Cunha Velho, administrador da TV, Cristina Vastomé, da SIC, desculpe, que ainda não a tinha cumprimentado, muito obrigado por ter vindo, João Vieira Lopes, Presidente da Confederação de Comércio e Serviços, que sei que hoje ainda para mais tem um dia bastante atarefado, que tem mais outras associações a quem recorrer, é uma honra contar consigo. Cumprimentar os anteriores presidentes da APIT aqui presentes, sobretudo Francisco Ribeirinho, que foi o fundador da APIT, o único presidente com quem eu não cheguei a trabalhar, mas que é um prazer tê-lo connosco hoje aqui. Agradecer aos oradores que aceitaram este convite para estar hoje aqui connosco. Catarina da Forné, querida amiga, muito obrigada. Já vejo também o Bruno Santos, José Fragoso, o Amaral chegará mais tarde, mas todos aqueles que aceitaram, uma vez mais, este convite. Aos nossos convidados e oradores estrangeiros, quem dirijo, permitam-me uma saudação especial. Dear friends, now in English, thank you so much for having accepted this invitation without hesitations. It is a pleasure to have you here today, and I hope you feel very welcomed. Caríssimos amigos e todos aqueles que se quiserem juntar a nós, sejam mesmo muito bem-vindos. Este, como eu disse há pouco, não é um encontro qualquer. É sim um verdadeiro reencontro em que temos o extra de estar a comemorar os 25 anos da APIT. Portanto, em vez de ser um encontro institucional, eu diria que isto é um encontro emocional. E é mesmo isso que queremos que seja. Preparámos um programa arrebatador, mais flexível, mais relaxante, e tivemos já um desses momentos. Vamos ter uma paragem para almoço com tempo para conversarmos e depois no final para comemorarmos os 25 anos da APIT. Andamos todos muito saturados do que o mundo nos tem trazido e infelizmente tem-nos trazido coisas más, pandemias, guerras, tristezas e portanto o mote hoje é desfrutar. A palavra de ordem é desfrutar de conhecimento, troca de ideias, mas também de um abraço, de uma boa gargalhada. O meu desejo, o nosso desejo é que seja de facto um dia memorável e de celebração, que nenhum de nós se esqueça pelo que passamos. pelo isolamento laboral e social, pelas máscaras, pelos zooms que nos conduziram por ruas escuras, becos sem saída. Não queremos mais nada disso. Queremos só praças cheias de luz e boa energia e, por isso, como veem, estamos num sítio completamente diferente. A ideia foi mesmo passar essa mensagem. Queremos sítios assim, abertos, em que possamos estar juntos, em que nos possamos abraçar e, por isso, estar aqui neste lugar maravilhoso. Portanto, que seja, acima de tudo, um dia bonito. E hoje não vos vou tomar mais tempo, porque vou guardar aqueles meus agradecimentos de ir às lágrimas só para a parte do brinde, não se salvam dessa parte, da parte do brinde dos 25 anos da APIT, e, portanto, vou-vos apresentar a primeira oradora do dia, Mathilde Fiquet, que é secretária-geral da CEPI, da Confederação Europeia de Produtores Independentes, a que a APIT orgulhosamente preside neste momento. Portanto, permitam-me que passe um bocadinho para o inglês, coitados dos nossos convidados, que não percebem muito o que estamos a dizer, embora eu vamos descansar, fiz todos um briefing do que é que se ia passar primeiro. We are now going to begin our meeting with a presentation from Mathilde Fiquet. She is the General Secretary of CEPI. I may say that she and Salvatore, which is with us today, are my European dream team. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to work with you both. And Mathilde is going to speak about the common challenge that the audiovisual sector has in Europe. I always used to say that we are 17 different countries, but we have the same problems. The only things that change is the dimension and the timing. Earlier or later, we are going to have the same problems. So, with no further ado, let's hear from Mathilde. Please, Mathilde, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Thank you also for inviting us in Lisbon. I'm extremely happy to be here, and a great anniversary to APIT, 25th anniversary. This is absolutely amazing. So I'm very glad to be part of today and to see all of you. First of all, I want to point out that it is very hard to come on stage just after your amazing comedian Herman Rode. I will not make jokes. I will not sing. I'm going to try to be my best, to be entertaining, but I'm pretty sure my content's not going to be as fun and amazing as the previous one. So please bear with me until the end, and then my European colleagues will be able to take over the lead. How does that work? So maybe just before I go on about the common industry challenges, I want to point out that since November, we have an amazing new chairman leading the network of European independent producers in Europe, and this is Susanna. So Susanna, since November, is at the head of CEPI, our organization, which represents 17 countries, 20 national organizations, 1 European association, and 1 company. So we do have that broad network. And what you just said in your conclusion, which is we all have the same challenges with variation, different timing, is absolutely true. And the conversation we had on a daily basis in our forum with our members are all pointing towards the same direction. So I think it's very important, especially when an association like CEPI is based in Brussels and is the interface that's going to help the voice of independent producers to be spoken to the European institutions, to be reflected in the outcome at legislative level. It is very important that we do have that legitimacy with all the countries. And I think with Susanna, we're extremely happy to have a new chairwoman is doing a great job. So in terms of priority, I think it's important to just show here how we are focused on the work we're doing and what is our objectives at CEPI. And we have validated them over the past years. And the first one, and probably the most important, is that CEPI's role is to accompany independent producers in that changing landscape. And I'm going to come back a lot around what is the changes and what are the challenges that we're facing together. But this is not our only priority. We do work a lot into funding and finding the right economic support for production, independent production across Europe. So making sure that funding programs at European level are still accessible, that the funding policy at European level goes in the right direction. Protecting intellectual property rights, obviously, is a very important priority for us. So we have to keep that on, and there are a number of legislation in Brussels that touches upon those issues, so we have to make sure we always keep an eye on that. And finally, promoting a responsible industry, because we know climate change is a very important topic. It's coming. There is a lot of legislation coming also in Brussels. So we have to make sure that sustainability is at the core of what we do. I mean, I told you I was definitely not going to be as funny as the previous speaker. I'm trying really hard. So, looking at Common Industry Challenge, before looking at the future, I just wanted to maybe have one small point about what we're currently facing. And in particular, there is one piece of legislation that CEPI in the past, before me, has been working a lot, and it's what we call the AVMS Directive, the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. And in particular, when we look at the implementation, and we know the implementation of that European directive in European countries is still ongoing, despite the long delay, we are looking at 3 different criteria, which are very important for producers. One is quota for European work. There are a new obligation in that legislation making sure that European work is represented in catalogs, especially for streamers. And that's very important because you want your content, your productions to be seen. The second is prominence of European work, and we are in a world where everything is digitalized, so it's obviously very important that your production is seen by the audience in order to create an interest. So that's also an aspect where we are working on and following how it's being implemented. And finally, but definitely not the least, this new legislation has created the opportunity for countries in Europe to impose obligations on streaming platforms to invest in production. And that is something we're following very closely because we're coming from a situation where streamers were just surfing in Europe but had no investment obligation like in some country broadcasters can have. And now we're starting to see a trend with some countries taking the lead, France being one of them, where there are investment obligation imposed on those companies so that some of the money they're making out of a market goes back to the production in that market. And this is a very important trend that we're seeing, and we have to continue to follow, and a positive trend. So, you did give me a hard challenge, Susanna, talking about industry challenge for 2 reasons. First of all, you're going to have an amazing panel of European representatives after. We're going to go in details into the situation in their respective country, and the last thing I want is talk before them and you hearing twice the same thing. The second reason I find this very challenging is that whenever I was trying to put up some slides together, everything is interconnected. All the issues are interconnected to the very situation of what producers are facing nowadays. So that's why I tried to put everything on one same slide, very high level, and we're going to try together to put up a story on looking at all those challenges. So I think what we can start with is that we're facing, as producers, an evolving environment for different reasons. First of all, there is a change of consumption from users. We have moved already some years ago from a situation where consumers were owning material with content on it to a situation where consumers want to have access at any time, from anywhere, from any device to content. And that's already a very big difference. What that has led to is that we've seen, obviously, a very rapid adoption of streaming platforms, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more of that today. And what it means is that it has created changes in the business model and flux between producers and their different partners that we have to unpack here today. Finally, and I think it's also an important point to raise, is that we still are facing an increased demand for content. People want to watch more. There is a demand for that, and it's important to raise that out. Even though COVID and the situation 2020 did lead to a decrease by 32% across Europe of production, 2019 was actually a highest peak from film production. So there is definitely that demand there. So looking at how producers' partners are evolving, I've mentioned streamers. Well, what's very important to realize with streamers is that they are growing. In 2020, streamers, or streaming platform, represent only 6% of European audiovisual revenues. Those are figures from our European Audiovisual Observatory. So 6% is not that much. However, if you look at trend, between 2014 and 2020, streamers had a 40% growth. If you look at subscription-based VOD platforms, we're talking 95% growth. So it is definitely a trend to take into consideration, and there are different degree of implementation depending on the countries, but exactly as Susanna said, we are all facing that new challenge at different timing, but it is there, and it's not going to go away. The second point that is, I think, important to take into consideration is that the streamers that win the highest part of the market are global platforms, and that also impact the way producers are working with them. If I looked at the 2020 figures for Portugal, for instance, and Netflix, Apple TV, and Amazon are the three biggest streamers, and together they're 81% of the market. So again, very important players to take into consideration with impact. But I don't want to leave the broadcasters completely aside, because they're obviously our natural partners for producing a lot of content, a lot of TV content. And what we see is also a trend for broadcasters to, I like to call it, beefing up their relation, because they see streamers as direct competition. So they're also changing their business model, they're creating their own platforms, and they're altering also the relationship that they have with their producers, because they know they have a direct competition danger versus with the streaming platform. So it also changed the relationship that producers have with broadcasters. So what it means for producers is that across Europe, we are facing tougher partners to deal with. And that tough and flux negotiation has several impacts. Several impacts on negotiating rights, for instance. For how long this partner is going to get the rights? Am I going to have to get it back? Is there going to be an exclusivity? Is there going to be holdbacks imposed by the broadcaster, which means I cannot have my content on a streamer at the same time? We had a very interesting discussion on Friday where our colleague from Austria, who's not here today, so I can say that, was telling us that broadcasters in Austria are developing their platforms, and they think that the rights that they have for catch-up TV can also apply for streaming platforms, for their own streaming platform. So all those are the negotiations that are taking place at various degrees within various countries, and it's putting a lot of pressure on producers because those partners want to have the maximum content for the longest, for the cheapest. Another trend that we have observed is a change in the business model, in particular when we want to work with streamers. Streamers are a huge opportunity to access audience, to have our content being seen by large platforms. But it does create also some challenges because some of them, especially the global one, are imposing different trends. And we've seen a rise in commissioning or work for hire practices, which does raise a lot of questions with regard to the opportunities that represent for producers, but also the ability for producers to be able to work with the streamers without being subject to that type of business model. Because work for hire, commissioning, does have a certain impact. It is a very different business model that if I am doing my own film or my own content and I keep the IP and I'm the one to negotiate the mandate, the distribution mandate and all the rights and everything else. So those are very different business models. And I will pause here and point out that this is also one of the challenges we are facing when we as CEPI are explaining the situation to the European Commission, because they see large players as a good thing without necessarily understanding the entire impact that those players have on our ecosystem, where amazing content, which Europe will like, can come from smaller producers, and we don't see that as a problem. But they do have a tendency to compare apple and oranges with what's being done in the US, for instance, and how we do things in Europe. So this is one of the big challenges. I mentioned keeping the right. I did mention also on my slides the intellectual property. Here, the intellectual property raises a lot of problems. We need to have the intellectual property with the ability to negotiate rights for different reasons, because we need to be able to have the revenues. Those are assets which we can use to then reinvest into new production, new project. And that is very important for the continuations of productions of cultural content, which is amazing. And this is what we're doing here. This is really what we're doing here. But it also raises a question, maybe at a higher level, on cultural sovereignty. We are having a discussion at European level about where are our cultural assets. Are they based in Europe? Are they owned by European players? can the revenues from those assets be reinvested in European productions, or are they actually owned by actors which are outside of Europe, whether streamers which are based in the US or hedge funds which have acquired companies in Europe? Those are a lot of interesting questions that we are also working on, which may not necessarily be important on a daily basis, but on a long-term strategy is very important, because we want to make sure that the assets that we produce today, that you produce today, stays in Europe and can be reinvested. Those are really the most important. It also raises the question, that huge change of business model, that huge change of relationship with your partners. It raises question about what is a producer? What are you doing? What are your job? How do you define yourself? And that is an ongoing conversation we've been having with many of the CEPI members and in other events as well. How do you define yourself? And in a certain way, it is very important for us, and I'm coming back to the issue of business model, it is very important for CEPI that we are able to maintain this ability for you to choose how do you want to produce your content. That is the most important, and that is what we feel is also a threat with those huge changes, if we don't find a way to make sure there is safeguards in place to protect the work that you are doing together. And finally, another point that I wanted to mention, and we've been starting to discuss about it, is where is it? Consolidation. Should be somewhere. Can't read that. The fact that also in phases of all those changes in the market, we are seeing trends of consolidation of companies. And here, again, I am coming back to the speech and the discourse that the European Commission is pushing forward, which is the bigger the better. We want to promote large production companies which will be able to compete on an international level with large American companies. And this is not the vision we have at CEPI. At CEPI, we represent independent producers because we know creation comes from diversity. And it's absolutely important that we understand that trend to be able to, again, make sure that we have safeguards in place for that. And finally, a number of other issues which are extremely important as well, but which we also know producers are facing at, and I'm sure my colleagues are going to talk about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but lack of skills is something which is affecting you on a absolutely daily basis. So it is a huge problem. Finding the right partners, finding the right workers to do a production is extremely important. Collective or negotiation in general with authors, I know it's going to be spoken about with broadcasters as well, is also something that is very important because we feel more and more the pressure across Europe on all those issues. I mentioned sustainability earlier. This is coming. There's going to be a lot more pressure on those issues, making sure we have sustainable production. There are works already done at European level on how can we make production more sustainable, how can we make it more environmentally friendly. We also have proposals for legislation in Brussels, which are not specifically targeted to production, but which will impact production, which we need to look at, and making sure that we find the right way to adjust how production weighs, but in a way that is possible and comfortable for us and does not affect the ability for smaller producers to be able to carry on the work they're doing. So we need to find that right level and that trend, which will be progressive without creating too much hurdle on the broader industry. And finally, and that is not on the slide because we spoke about it on Friday and I had to give my slide on Thursday. All of this, and it's actually very logical, leads also to rising costs. And that's also a very, very important issue that we need to start tackling. Thank you for bringing that up last Friday. So I'm not going to leave you with just that because that's a little bit depressing. So just in terms of what we do as CEPI, I think already a big part of the challenge is to try to put all those issues together in the same box, shake a bit, and see what comes out. How can we identify the main trend? What are the priorities on which we have to work? Where can we address a challenge? Which challenge needs to be addressed at national level? Which challenge needs to be addressed at industry level? Which challenge needs to be addressed at European level? And which challenge can be addressed at legislative level? What can I do at European level to make sure that in the law there are safeguards which will benefit for the entire industry, knowing that we have the same challenge, but we also operate in a very different way across countries. So this is that delicate balance, making sure everyone goes in the same direction, but still reflecting the national exceptions that everyone has across Europe. The first most important point is we talk together. And that's, I think, the best value of CEPI. We talk together. We get understanding about what's happening in Denmark, what's happening in Ireland, what's happening in Poland, what's happening in Czech Republic, what's happening in France, in Portugal, thank you. So we understand and we can see the trend by talking together. We can see how we're going, what is the direction. What happening in one country may happen in another in 5 years, and understanding how how the industry reacted really helps other countries react in a better, same, different ways. So that's very important. The network. The second is what I call the interface, and that's my job and my colleague Salvatore, is that communicating in a language that politicians can understand the realities of our business, and that's not easy. They don't understand, usually. They really, really don't. So that is a big challenge, and we are working on making sure, finding the right communication channel so that the legislator at European level understand, and then will be able to legislate in the right way at European level. So finally, the last is that we need to come up with solutions, and that I'm going back to the network. Thanks to our network, this is how we're going to be able to find a solution, the proposition that we can send forwards to the legislator at European level. But I also think it's equally important to have that national coordination at the same time. We need to work on both fronts. And that's why, again, here, the network of CEPI, I feel, is extremely important because we can have that coordination. So, common industry challenge. We do have a lot. I think we're all under a lot of pressures. But we're starting to see at least the trend, and we're working on a way forward together at European level, at national level, and with Susanna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mathilde, for your brilliant presentation. I think it was a great kickoff for the next panel and for today's discussion. Passando agora ao português, vamos passar agora então ao painel. Eu penso que estamos super dentro das horas, o que nos permite fazer isto calmamente e não haver aquele stress que normalmente há nos painéis. Portanto, vamos conseguir fazer isto com calma e dar tempo aos colegas que façam as suas apresentações. Eu vou então chamar, teremos este painel foi pensado de uma forma um bocadinho diferente. Nós habitualmente conhecemos muitos países de que falamos sempre, de Espanha, de França, até mesmo do Reino Unido, temos mais noção do que se passa lá, e a opção foi convidarmos países de que normalmente não falamos e com quem normalmente não temos parcerias. Portanto, daí temos presentes a Polónia, a Dinamarca, a Irlanda e a República Checa. E este painel eu tenho certeza que vai ser muitíssimo interessante. Chamo, em primeiro lugar, para se juntar já a nós, a professora Catarina da Februné, que vai fazer a moderação deste painel, a quem agradeço penhorada a tua presença. Catarina, por favor, podes já passar para aqui. A Catarina é ótimo porque eu desafio a Catarina sempre para as coisas mais indescritíveis e ela aceita sempre e disse, vais moderar um painel em inglês? E a Catarina, vamos! E depois, 2 dias antes é quando nós entramos as duas em stress, o que é ótimo, mas pronto, estamos aqui e portanto é com muito... Obrigada, Catarina, por aceitar sempre estes desafios que eu te vou laçando. Portanto, agora o que eu vou fazer é chamar os colegas a todos a virem para o palco e depois fazerem as apresentações. So now I will ask you for both of you, all of you, to join us, please. Alicia, Philippe, Soren, and Anthony, please come to the stage. First of all, I'm going to do the presentations, but with you here near me, just to see you very well, please. Choose your seats and be comfortable. You can choose it. So let me present to you, first of all, I'm certain going to say wrong the names. Please excuse me for that. But let me present you first Alicia Grauwon-Jakzik.
Very good.
She's the president from KIPA, the Polish Association of Producers. She's also a producer herself, actually. KIPA has joined CEPI as the pandemic was starting, so this is I only have been with Alicia twice, one today and the other one in the General Assembly in Madrid in November. So as all our meetings were held by Zoom. However, I can say that it's a pleasure and an honor to work with you and to have her here with us today, not only for her professional side, but I have to say that she has also developed an amazing initiative to help our Ukrainian colleagues since the ongoing war started. I am grateful to have her here today and to be able to work alongside her. Thank you so much. Then we will have Søren Jorgensen. Yeah? Okay. From Denmark. I've known Søren for a long time, and I can say that he's an amazing legal advisor of ProF Denmark, which is the Danish association. Me and Søren have a kind of love and hate relationship because we are completely different. He is Danish, I'm Portuguese. But of course there's a lot of mutual respect between us, and it is a pleasure to have him here, and I'm sure that we can learn a lot from him. However, do fasten your seatbelts, because he promised me he only has horrible things to say. I'm counting on him. In third, we'll have Anthony Muldham from Ireland. This is actually the first time that we meet in person because of COVID. He's Irish, and I know you will notice that since he started talking because of his accent, he's very, very Irish, but it's lovely, of course, and thank you so much for joining us today. Last but not least, we have Philippe Bobinski from Czech Republic. Hi, Philippe. He's a fantastic producer and also a member of the board of directors from Czech Association of Producers. I have also known Philippe for quite a while now, and he has become a friend. I spoke to him before accepting the role of president of CEPI. In fact, he's the one to blame for it. All the added responsibilities I have now are your fault, so be aware of that. So we will start with Alicia, and then we'll follow with the others, and then we're gonna have the discussion. So, Alicia, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and thank you for having me today with all of my colleagues. It's a real pleasure to give you a very brief overview on Poland and our market, which is mostly related with theatrical release. Why? I'm gonna tell you. I've got 44 slides, don't worry, most of them are pictures. If you have more deeper questions about details about our market, just feel free to ask me more after our discussion. And at the beginning, I would like to say a few words about KIPA. KIPA is the oldest and the biggest producer association. We were established in 2000. We gained like 160 members at the moment. However, we combined big production facilities, feature films, also producers related with TV production, animations, and documentaries. So we are quite, wide open for different key players. Also, we have a film schools and regional film funds amongst our members, which is kind of useful, especially with independent film production, because we can combine and work together on some regulation manners. Few facts about Poland. This is Poland. As you can see, we are quite big, and that will be the answer for many questions related with platform streamers. Who are very strong at Poland at the moment. We are members of NATO, European Union, United Nations, Schengen area as well. We are 39 million people at the moment, and the capital is Warsaw. 90% of the production is localized over there. Our currency is zloty, and €1 is around 5 zloty, 4.5. It depends on. I mean, last month it was crazy because of the war, and we are quite close to the border with Ukraine, so you can imagine how much the effect of the impact of the war is focused on us. Production matters. We produce around 50-60 feature films per year. 90% of them are theatrical ones. As you can see, the average budget for full-length feature film is around €1.5 million. It has changed lately because it was like 1.1, 1.2 few months ago, but the inflation at the moment is like 10-20%, and the cost of production increased very much in just 1 year. So at the moment I would say, and I just applied for feature film 2 weeks ago, so I closed my budget on around €2.5 million, which is quite high for Poland and I think more our territories. There is no such format as a television films at the moment, because what I would like to try to do with this presentation, I try to focus on the cinematic, because Polish production is mostly for theaters, but taking into account that you are the TV producer, I wanted to emphasize more the requirements and conditions for those kind of production in Poland. So, which is strange, the broadcasters in Poland are not a very strong key players on the market. We have only one public broadcasters and 2 commercials one. So they produce feature films or series, but it's around 3 or 4 production per year, and the feature films are, to be honest, dedicated to theaters. So when the commercial broadcasters such as TVN or Polsat produce a film, it will have a theatrical release or a streaming platform release. In 90s and at the beginning of the 2000s, there were television films, but it has changed rapidly in the last 15 years. So the shooting day is 12 hours, 11 and 1 hour for as a break, which is, I think, quite standard for European production. And audience in cinemas, well, I know it's a big numbers. We have like 1,200 screens, 3 international chains on the market, and the audience and admission has rapidly dropped during the pandemic. But what is important is to realize that the admissions in 2022, the first quarter, was the same as in 2019. One thing has changed. Domestic films are not very good, they are not strong anymore, which is very hard for our market and probably the reason of new trends which appears in context of relationship with streaming platforms. So blockbusters, European films are the same as before pandemic, but the drop on Polish titles are like 50 or 60% in regard to admissions. Polish titles were very strong at the top 10 in box office. Usually we have like 4-7 Polish titles in top box office in Poland, and they gather like 2.5 million viewers. And the best Polish title for last year gathered 800 people. So you can see the recoupment for the production, feature theatrical production is no longer in place. Those are the titles inbound production shooting in Poland, but I think this one will be much more of interest for you. Those are the streaming platforms production. Netflix, who is the very strong player on our market. Those are only production for the last year. You might have known them because all of them appears in top 10 globally. We don't really understand why, because they're not very good one. However, people abroad and across world would like to watch this. And this year, Netflix announced they're going to open the office in Warsaw, and they launch 18 production for this year. 9 feature films and 9 series. It's a huge, if you remind that we all together, as for the moment, produce around 50 or 60 production. And this is only Netflix. We're going to have Disney from June. We've already been there with HBO and Canal Plus, Amazon, and Viaplay. There are some rumors Showtime and Sky is waiting for Poland and trying to be a part of this game on our field from 2023. So in regard to the broadcaster, the traditional one, you can see that data drops all over the year. So in 2020, that's the market share of the major broadcasters. On the left side, you have data from this year. And just to make a brief information about the other broadcaster, they're a very small one, thematic one, and not really important anymore. Still, the numbers are quite good because we have a lot of small cities where the internet infrastructure is not very strong yet. That's why television is pretty fine. But what is, as you can see, this is from 2005 to 2021, drop in the public TV, from 50% of market share to 28%. I think it is important to keep in mind that in Poland we have a very specific political situation for the last 8 years, so the public TV is more the governmental TV. That's why the people from big cities switching for example, streaming platforms. But we have a lot of discussion during the pandemic how streaming platforms would affect theaters. And the thing is, they do not affect theaters, they affect broadcasters at the most. What is quite characteristic for us, I think, in compared with other countries from Europe, pay TV is really strong. So, not really broadcasters like the commercial one or traditional one, but pay TV, because the value of the market for pay TV is 2 billion euros. At the same time, the value of the streaming market is 350 million euro, so the difference is quite high. And we have like 6 million subscribers for OTT, which means there is still place to grow for streaming platforms. However, the HBO and Canal Plus, those are 2 pay TV channels in Poland, are very strong, and as I mentioned, they produce like 3-4 series per year, and with Canal Plus around 3-4 feature films. And they announced they're going to grow as well because everyone would like to find each other on the internet field. Regional film funds and commission, if you would like to shoot in Poland, they will help you to organize everything you need. Incentives in Poland, we have a tax rebate system. I'm not going to go further on that or very deeply because you can find all the information in the presentation. If you would like to make some production in Poland and produce series, you are able to do that and have 30% of incentives. However, it has to be a high TV premium content, not general TV series. So just keep few information. It's almost the same as in other countries. We just announced that system in 2019. We have like 100 million zloty, which means 20-25 million euros to spend yearly. It will be much more. First come, first serve, no deadlines. So you just need to find a partner from Poland because only Polish companies are eligible to apply. And going to challenges for our market as for the moment, I think you have an impression what might be the challenges. However, theaters, because if we do not have an admission in theater, most of the producers, most of us, will just switch to collaboration with streaming platforms. Not that because we don't understand that IP is our value and something we need to generate as a Europe, but because we have no choice. films do not recoup anymore at the moment, Polish films. Also, we have struggling with cash flow. If you are producers, you know that this is one of our major issues. So it is easy to collaborate with someone who give you money and who is a partner for you even in a difficult moments during the production. And besides the streaming platforms, we have a public TV and only 2 commercial broadcasters, so that's an easy choice, to be honest. And the production costs increasing very, very much in a few months. And I know we had this discussion like 1 year ago and even 5 months ago, and we was discussing because of the economic situation and inflation in general, objective matters. But it's not the case. I mean, the inflation is like 10-12% for Poland at the moment, and the cost increasing is around 20%. So it is mostly related with the authors and below the line crew. And this is, in my opinion, in Kipa's opinion, one of the major challenge for us, because in Poland there were no union before, and they appeared last year. So the expectation for money, and because of the presence of the streaming platforms who are, well, assessed by the below the crew line as players who can pay with no limit, the production costs increase, which is simply the way to swift us to the production and to work for hire. Implication of the Russian war, because of this economical issue, I think Poland is more affected with that. We don't know what will happen, but our economy is not in the best shape because of this war. Still counting on, which is very practical maybe, but we are producers, so we are practical. We're counting on the below-the-line crew from Ukraine, to be honest, to build our sources, but it doesn't happen yet. And business model for independent film production, which is a key. So if we do not have an admission, we do not earn money on the release in next windows. So that's why we chose the streaming platforms. And which is very important in this point, and from our conversation, I know that a lot of you don't realize that copyright in Poland, which was introduced in 1994, doesn't include internet. So there is no regulation, copyright regulation on streaming platforms. That's why, probably, but that's why we are a good place to start the production, to launch 18 or 20 or 30 titles per year. We are big countries, 39 million, so a lot of subscribers. And also we have a film tradition, so there is a lot of people capable of starting a shooting and working ad hoc on the production from abroad. And this is very new, but I'm really afraid of that. So cost increasing because it simplifies why we are starting with platforms. And that will be all. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so please feel free to ask me, and this presentation will be spread, I hope, by our organizer. Thank you very much. This is a very briefly overview on Polish market, and I do hope to make it more clearly during the discussion.
The Danish Producers Association. We've got about 130 members, and we cover feature films, documentaries, TV, gaming, animation, dubbing. So we are a country of 5.8 million people, so there's only one Producers Association. And also on the other side, all the unions, they have one for the actors, one for the directors, and one for the writers, and so on. So normally we are, it's very, it's a hard place to be, because we only got one opponent and we only one person. We can't play each other out. As Susanna said, I think I totally agree that we have the same problems in Europe, probably. It's just a matter of dimension and time, I think. And I think when we're talking about time, we are ahead of time. And what I'm going to show you I have 5 slides. They're not as sexy as Alicia's. They're very, very simple. And they start out being really light, and you can enjoy, relax, and then they get worse and worse. And, if I do my job, you'll start crying at the 5th slide. So I'm just going to make, a very short take on what's going on in Denmark as we speak, because we expect a new result tomorrow on the media agreement. We have, Denmark is very much regulated by political agreements. We have a media agreement that basically regulates the public service broadcasters, Denmark's radio, that also produces TV. You know the drama, probably Borgen and the stuff that they've made. And then we got TV2 Denmark, which is a commercial public service broadcaster. And what they are obliged to do, what they have to do, what they have to buy, how much religious stuff they have to produce, how much children's programs and stuff, is regulated in the media agreement. And one of the things that was left out for further agreements was what's called the Netflix tax. As popular, it's more contribution. It was supposed to be negotiated in 2019, just after the agreement was entered into, but the minister lost a newborn child, so she was away for a long time, and then we had the COVID, so now they're negotiating it. Primarily, it's a streaming service contribution, Netflix tax. We can't call it a tax. A tax is getting money into the state finances you can spend on highways and hospitals and children and books, while a contribution gets into a specific thing and it's paid out. Again, we expect the Netflix tax, I can't call it, to generate 150 to 200 million Danish kroner. That's 20 to 27 million euro. And it's supposed to go into the Danish Film Institute. Half of it will go for feature films, the other half for TV series. And the half that goes for the TV series, the platforms can apply for as well. And the laying requirements is how much they have to buy outside their TV station, and that benefits us. Then the film agreement is not in place at the moment, but we negotiate all the time. As soon as it starts in 2019, we are starting to negotiate the new one, the next one. Then we have the implementation of the DSM Directive Chapter 3. That's the authors are very much aware of that, because that's where they're secured a lot of rights. And then we have a lot of outdated collective bargaining agreements. The one with the rights is on feature films is from '96, and the one on TV with the actors are from 2002. So they're extremely outdated. They don't take care of digital rights, which is a huge problem. So that was the easiest part. One of what Mathilde also talked about, the change of business model. I don't know if you ever heard about the Capitán reservation, and I don't know if you have that in Portugal, but in Denmark we consider ourselves as very developed. It's licensing of retransmission rights. The reservation is in all contracts, from the authors to the producer, from the producer to the TV station, or from the producer to the distributor, if it's a feature film, a movie. It's a reservation that says that all rights have been transferred to the TV station. The TV station can put the production on flow and maybe on their player. But if the TV stations enter into an agreement with a distributor for a cable package, that distributor has to go to a rights management body called Capitán and pay for that. And the philosophy is a double economy. There is the TV station who has paid for their rights, but then there's a new one coming in, a new company coming in making money on those rights. So it's a double rights system. So that system generates, when it generated the most 3 years ago, it was generating 175 million euros. And we have 5.8 million people. Now it's down to 150 million euros, and we fear that it will be down to 100 million euros in a couple of years' time. And you can see if that number goes down from 175 million euros down to half, it will affect the whole business, because it's all rights holders. It's all the authors, all the unions, all the guilds, and the Producers Association who makes a living out of those money, because we administer them. We take our cut. So that when that number goes down, the whole business is shaking. I've just put in the numbers from Sweden and Norway. They have exactly the same system as us, but they haven't been as good as we are. You can see in Sweden they make 9.5 million euro. We make 175. And if you had this, Norway is 29 million euros. If you had the same system as we have, and if we look at the 10.35 million people you are in Portugal, according to Wikipedia, you would have made 312 million euro. I don't know do you have such a system? You do have such a system. How much? No. But is 312 million euro, is that a substantial amount of money? It is, right. Yeah, but when we speak to the Americans, that's what they spend in their cantina, in the big companies. They really don't like it. They call it communism. They say, no, nobody's going to, handle our rights collectively. But to us, that's a very important system. And because this is one of our biggest problems, the unions and the guilds, they have some really, really clever lawyers. They're much cleverer than we are. And they're working literally 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. They have some nutcases, unfortunately, because it's difficult. It's easy if you call your opponent an idiot. But if your opponent is actually very intelligent, it's very difficult, right? So in 2016, they saw the cable cutting and the cable shaving that affects the Copydan reservation money. So they established something called Create Denmark. You've never ever heard about it, but when I travel, I meet people from all over the world. A lot of people have heard about this, and a lot of people have been met with, we won't enter into an agreement with you, we are awaiting what is happening in Denmark. It's 10 unions and guilds. It's all the writers, the directors, the actors, the journalists, the musicians, the DOPs, the set designers, production designers, the editors. It's all those. It's all of them. And the unions, they get, when you become a member of the union, you transfer your rights, your digital rights to the union. The union asks Create Denmark to handle those digital rights. And for SVOD services, so when a producer goes to a member, or actually a function of these 10 unions, and say, look, will you be on my Netflix platform production? They say, yes, but I can't give you my rights. But those you can get from Create Denmark. So they have actually, that's a very, very clever move. You can't get their rights. I mean, in a traditional world, in the old world, you got all rights, and you sold them to a TV station. The TV station exploited the program or the production. That was it, everybody got paid. Now you can't do that. We negotiated with Create Denmark from 2016, 5.5 fucking years of my life I've spent with these people, and they're very good. And they've just said no, 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 no. And 2 CEOs of the Producers Association left because of this, more or less. We got a third one, and he is a journalist, so he's not as stubborn and unflexible as lawyers. So we got an agreement, 1st of January 2022. The whole atmosphere in the room from the author's side, from Create Denmark's side, has been the sky is the limit. We want more. We know all that. We want more. We want bigger. We want faster. They've just said no to every compromise we come up with. And they now have their agreement. And we presented that agreement to the platforms. We did that in January, February. We've had 2 meetings with Viaplay, HBO, TV2 Denmark. We've had 1 meeting with Netflix. We're waiting for the next meeting will be 3rd of June. And the first meeting was a listening meeting. These, the platforms were listening and very polite. They, how you do it, you praise they praised our work. They said, very good job, And then they all said, oh, it looks very difficult. And they all, especially Viaplay and HBO, they are managed by, or the people we work with are Brits and Swedes. If you know Brits and Swedes, they're very polite. Oh, it's very difficult, it looks, it's challenging, blah, blah, blah. TV2 Denmark and Netflix, they just said, go fuck yourself. The problem is now that since that framework agreement came into place 1st of January, none of them have greenlit one production. None of them have greenlit any development.
And who's going to be hit by that first? The writers. The writers are angry. They're furious. Now the directors are furious. The producers are crying. There's no work anymore. And what I'm just going to show you is, I don't know if you can see down there this is the calculator in the agreement. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see, the blue numbers are all the factors. This is version 875 or something like that. So if you look at the first cell up there, it says 0.2888. And people always, when they see that the first time, they say, what is that? What's the logic behind that number? And what's the logic behind the next number? Because they're all really square numbers. There is no logic to it. We've been working with models looking like this for 5 years. We put in the factors, and every time the calculator spits out a number and the producers say, this is fair, this is a good model. The authors will say, no, it's not, it's way too cheap. And the other way around. So this is like 1,000 times we've been working this, trying to tweak all the factors to find something that we all think is fair. Because that's what it's all about, a balanced and fair agreement. And we worked on this for 5.5 years, and this is just, I'm sorry if you can't see it, this is, we put in, we put in a fictitious Netflix production. What you put in is the budget. You put in the payment, the salary for the directors, writers, and actors. You put in the amount of subscribers in Denmark, the amount of subscribers in the world, and it spits out. You see, in this fictitious production, the budget is 50 million Danish kroner, which is about 7 million euro. Spits out 5.2 million Danish kroner as a rights payment, which is 700,000 euros. That will be paid during to this table. 80% of that money will be paid the first 10 years. It's a yearly payment. And then, because it's Netflix, they need rights for 50 years. And then the rest will be paid out over the years. So the first year, the authors get 29% of the rights payment. Second year, 15%. Third year, 10%, because the value of the production goes down. I think it goes down steeper than what this says, but that's the agreement. Do you think Netflix and HBO and Viaplay think this is a good idea? That they every year have to, and every production have to sit and look at all the numbers and pay money? No, they don't. They don't like that. Do you think we can solve this? No, we cannot. The reason why it's subscription-based is that we can't get the data of some consumption. But the thing is, if we even got the data, the payment would be the same, because the authors think that 10% of the budget, in this case, is a fair payment. So we're in a situation where this is the result of 5.5 years' work, and we've come nowhere. And why this is so important to talk about it, I've talked about this in CEPI and in the world since 2016. First time I presented the idea, you know, I was meeting people in here, and they would say, oh, you're from Denmark, so what are you doing? I said, oh, actually, I have something to tell you. And I told them about Create Denmark, I told them about this, and they all, you know, if you have the picture of a bar where a woman is in a bar and the man comes up and says something really inappropriate, and the woman just like turns around and walks away because it's really inappropriate. That's what I experienced for 2 years. Every time I said, look, I have this, you know, this is going on in Denmark. You know, people looked at me. It was not like they said, oh, that's strange, or we never heard about that. No, they just looked at me and thought, that guy's crazy, he's stupid. And they walked away. And I sincerely think this is the biggest threat to Europe, in the sense that if this works in Denmark, trust me, you will be met by this. And this is now it's Netflix, so all the politicians says, of course the American's going to pay. But, you know, Create Denmark, they've made this strategy that first they take the big ones, then they're going to go for the feature films, and then they're going for the TV productions. You know, all the TV productions that you produce, if you produce factual, documentaries, whatever you produce, some TV station is actually buying it. And this model could work for any TV station, for any production. And, you know, if they see it work in Denmark, they will export this model. And a lot of people tell me, our unions, they can't work together, they're stupid. But it's not the unions. There'll be some kind of lawyer in Portugal who will read this and read the documents, and he will contact all the unions and guilds, and he will say, in Denmark, they made this agreement. It generates 100 million Danish kroner. It generates, 15 million euros a year. This is just Denmark, 5 million people. Portugal, double, 30 million euros just in Portugal. Shouldn't we do the same? Yeah. So I think you should be very scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm exhausted. We are exhausted. Honestly, you should be crying. You should be sorry for the dinner later on because you'll all be very sad. But this is. Hopefully, it's clear. But I think it's very, very difficult. So that was my 25 cents.
Hi. I'll try and be a bit more optimistic than Søren. What button am I pressing? Am I there? Oh, there I am. Oh, there we go. Great. So, thank you all very much. I just want to say thank you to Susanna. She took part in a panel discussion for us last week, and we had, on the Netflix tax in Ireland, and we had government representatives on the call, and they spoke to us today after, and they spoke about you and your contribution and how valuable they found it for their own discussions on bringing in a content levy in Ireland. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. So I work with Screen Producers Ireland. We represent 150 independent production companies in Ireland. They range from feature film, TV drama, factual entertainment, and we don't represent animation. We've actually seen a big surge in production companies in Ireland in the last 4 to 5 years. In 2018, we had 80 members. And during COVID, we actually were at the forefront of the COVID safety guidelines on productions, and that led to a big increase in membership for the organisation. So it's all very positive from that front. So as I said, we've got some film, TV, doc, and some animation companies. What I want to do is kind of bring you on a whistle-stop tour of the Irish situation at the moment, because if I was to sum up where we are right now, we are trying to balance the creation of Indigenous independent content across all platforms and broadcasters against the need to bring in incoming high-end productions so that we have the crew to then work on the Indigenous Irish productions. It's a challenge because there's a lot of competing forces at play. You have our public service media who are putting in about 65 million to the Irish sector every year, but we have government departments who really want Netflix in Ireland. They really want Apple TV. They really want Disney Plus, and that is taking crew and cast away from the independent productions, and that's the kind of dynamic where we're at the moment. We are the voice to government and unions on behalf of producers in Ireland, the same way that I'm sure we are here. But so just to give you an overview of the sector is worth about $1 billion, maybe a little bit, 1.1 billion a year. And we've got about 7,000 people working in the sector, and that's from producers to crew, directors, writers, the whole thing. And they just said one of the pieces I've left out is we obviously have an Indigenous language, the Irish language, and that sector is worth about 45 million a year. And it's heavily based on the west of the country. So in terms of production in Ireland, what you have is on the east coast, you've got about 90% of production of English language content. And on the west coast and southwest coast, you've got more or less 90% of the Irish language production. So there's quite an imbalance in how cast and crew live in Ireland, how they travel across the country for jobs. And that has a big impact on wages, on accommodation costs for productions. The reason I talk about this is because at the moment, our public service media is under serious threat. RTE is the main English language broadcaster, and they put about 40 million into the English language production sector, but they are under constant threat because the government does not support RTE in a real way, and that means the TV licence fee is underfunded, and any impact on the TV licence fee affects the Irish independent production sector, while TG is the Irish language broadcaster, and they have done an excellent job of ensuring central funding from government, which has meant that the Irish language production sector has gone from about 25 million investment 4 years ago to 35 million investment last year, which has seen a huge surge for TG on international content distribution. Screen Ireland is our main funding body for feature film and TV drama. They've also seen a massive increase in funding, but they are heavily focused on bringing in Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus into the country. And the BAI then is our regulator, but it's also a funder, and it has a fund of about 20 million a year it gives to independent productions, but solely on Irish cultural grounds. So Irish history documentaries, Irish dramas with the Pacific cultural theme in Ireland. And then our 481, which is our film and tax credit, is 32% on 80% of eligible expenditure, and that's due for review next year. And again, the big fear is that they're going to review it to focus a lot more on incoming production. So, the big thing for us at the moment is that we want a Netflix tax in Ireland, and the government are really against it. They are very concerned that if we brought in a Netflix tax, that it would really hamper the use of our studios. And when I said that balance between incoming and domestic, at the moment in Ireland we have 3 main studios, and there are 6 in planning permission stage, and one of those studios alone will increase the size of studio space in Ireland by 4 times. And what that means is that all the cast and crew that could be working on a public funded production are going to go to those higher rates that Netflix can offer. And even as it is, we're seeing that with the UK being so busy on streaming-led productions, that they're actually taking crew from Ireland, giving them 1-year contracts at increased rates, and we're down editors, we're down costume designers, we're down locations, and that's having a real impact on our industry. The other piece to follow on from what Soren was talking about is the copyright directive is causing great uncertainty in Ireland, because we have no history of that type of law at all. And what's happened is the writers and directors are figuring out that suddenly they can get increased money from productions in a way they couldn't before, and they're now working together, which has never happened before for us. So we're kind of on your trajectory. We're looking at a Create Ireland effectively, you know. And the last piece that's big is environmental sustainability has become a huge part of the sector in the last 2 years. And we're at a point now where every single funder is requiring a Irish production to do a carbon calculator and to have sustainable production as part of their work. And the problem is that there's been no history of that in Ireland. So we're trying to train up producers and crew to do that work at a very rapid pace, and that's causing a lot of difficulty across the board. So again, for us, I've talked about that actually, let's move on. So Brexit, I haven't mentioned it yet, and I really should. So the problem with Brexit is that no one knows what Brexit is for independent productions yet. The biggest impact it's had so far is on the transfer of goods from Ireland to the UK and on wages. But because there's still so much debate about the definition of European works and about the Northern Irish Protocol, we really haven't seen what it's going to mean, and it could be another 5 years before we do. And that's very challenging because we are constantly talking about Brexit, but we've no real tangible thing that says what Brexit is for the sector. And the other piece then is the hunger for global content. So we do have a lot of situations where there's an energy being put into creating studios that are very, very big studios across the country, but we've no idea if those studios will still be needed in 5 or 10 years' time, because obviously we don't know what's going to happen to services in 5 or 10 years' time. And then the last piece is the content levy and the 30% European works quota, which again, we haven't really seen an impact on the quota for Irish libraries, producers' libraries, because no one's come looking for them yet, so we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with that. And then our challenges are all around crew shortages and about what the future for Irish producers is, because at the moment we have about 12 companies that are of large scale, and last week, for instance, Element Pictures, which will be one of our biggest producers, was bought by Fremantle, which is the first time that an Irish company was bought by a super indie such as Fremantle. But what we don't have is who's going to replace them in the next 5 or 10 years. So a big focus for us is trying to create a path for emerging producers, so we don't get to a situation in 5 years where we have 12, 15 big scale companies, but no one coming up the ranks to replace them when the time comes. And the big piece, I know someone else mentioned already, is the government don't really understand the sector. Matilda, you said this about the Commission. Like the government do not understand the sector. So a big topic of discussion at the moment is IP rights as part of the content levy and the Netflix tax, and the fact that we think that when a deal is done between a producer and Netflix on a Netflix tax from the production, the IP rights should be with the Irish producer, but our government does not understand what that means. They don't understand the process of IP rights, and that's a big challenge for us. And that is me, and that is done. And thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. How does this work? Oh, yes. Once again, thanks for having us here. It's very nice. Very great pleasure to be. It disappeared over there. To be in your wonderful country. Very beautiful. Actually, I understand very well with Susanna in CEPI's meeting always, because I don't know if it's because we are both countries, Czech Republic on one edge of the Europe, Portugal on the other edge of Europe, but we very, very often share the same problems, The producers, we are like not given almost any rights, and no right implementation of a European directive, and so seems like we are suffering the same problems in many aspects. And when I was listening to Søren, I was actually thinking that in every country the industry developed the way, who actually at certain moment had the strongest lobbying power, were it actors, were it musicians. In our country, for example, is a huge money coming to the collecting agency for the musicians, but almost no money for producers and basically for the producers. And in your country, it's very interesting how you solve the things, but question if you will produce still. Okay, I will go into the Czech Republic. APA, our association, represents more or less 133 members. It's always disappearing there. So sorry. We are a mix of original content producers, of the production service providers, producers of commercial spots. We also invited post-production houses who are co-investing with the producers or co-producing with the producers to be members of APA. And we have some associate members like startup companies and or maybe like small young producers coming into the industry. One thing which I wanted to mention, might be interesting for you, that how we finance APA. We actually finance something like 15% of the membership fees, and the other part is coming from the collective administrator money, which is collecting from the cinema, whatever, all the distribution, and we get quite a nice share of it, and that helps APA to survive. We are members of all these organizations which you know. Getting a little bit lost with this, but I think there is one thing on the slide which I was. which I wanted to mention, that we really try to position ourselves more and more like that we are industry. Because in the past, the association communication was always like the culture, the importance of language and all this. Indeed, this stays, but I think the politicians now, they really listen to our, let's say, like economical arguments, and the fact that we are positioning ourselves, that we are industry and we want continuity, we want to be able to maintain the competitivity on the international market, and that would help us a lot in the current lobbying. And I would say even that on the beginning I said we are suffering like I always share with Susanna, but at the same time some new things are happening now, and I think there is a hope for some change. But now I need my next slide, otherwise I'm lost.
Did I try to solve the problem?
I knew I should have brought my presentation. Maybe I have it somewhere here.
No, it's a problem of projection, I think.
Huh? Ah, thank you. Oh, it's my hotel card.
Oops. I'm going to see if I can help you. So, just a second.
I find it somewhere.
Exactly.
Let me see if I still find it here somewhere. Okay, I see the next slide was about all the activities of what APA is also doing, that except of the main part is what is the lobbying and the legislation and the protection of the producers. We are also having some other activities, such as, for example, we are nominating members of the Czech television, the public broadcaster. We are, of course, nominating and negotiating the members of the State Film Fund, etc., etc. So that was just the very general information on APA. The Czech industry, we have approximately 30 million euro annual turnover within the producers industry. However, something like 80% of it is built by international production service. 10% out of it is more or less the production of advertising, and only 10% of it is original film and television production, where we not always keep some rights, but it's something which is generated content from the producers and either co-produced or mainly the movies, or it's like a television series produced directly for television, and we are more and more the biggest fight for us is to have some share on the further distribution of it. In 2019 we had 66 new Czech movies released. I mentioned 2019 because it's a pre-COVID period. I don't know how it's going to develop, but probably will slowly come back more or less to this. 66 new Czech movies released in 1 year is a bit too much, I think. We don't really know what to do with it in the market, but it's. I actually hope that part of it could go to the television market, because some of the topics which are covered by these movies could be very well like a TV movie or a TV miniseries, but since the TV market was not really working well in the last 20 years, many producers decide to create their ideas or turn them into film instead of in television. We have also production incentives. If you are interested to come to the Czech Republic to shoot, we have 20% incentives on Czech expenses, including post-production. It's a very simple system, very direct. Basically, what you spend, you get 20% back. It's quite efficient. Czech Republic, we have great quality of crews. You might know that there has been a lot of international production being shot. We have interesting location, etc., etc. But it comes also with some threat, or with some. It has got some cons, which actually means that the market is a bit overheated, and we have quite high increase in the prices. And this is, on the other hand, damaging the national production and production of the local content, where we, again, trying to keep some IP or trying to keep some rights, because that's what somehow we believe should be the... Oh, it's here. The producer's main objective. Actually, now we are in quite a good time in TV and VOD development in our territory in Czech Republic. We have new investment from new platform Vojo, which is a part of the commercial broadcaster CME Group, which includes Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia. I think they have also TV station in Romania, Bulgaria. And they decided to build some kind of like a Central European, or at least a Czech and Slovak competition to Netflix. So they are investing a lot into the local and Czech language and Slovak language production. This is a positive news, but at the same time, we have a problem with Czech television public broadcaster financing, while so they don't have enough money, so their investment is decreasing. Netflix and the other platforms are coming to Czech Republic, and there we see. It's an opportunity, but also a threat. There is a big hub in Poland, as already Alicia said, and the Netflix seems to not to be so much willing to invest in the Czech content, Czech language content, because we are too small territory for them. We are trying to fight with it, not only against Netflix, but all the platforms. We are trying to redefine the definition of independent producer, and we are trying to impose investment quotas for platforms at the moment. These are our main priorities at this time. We have quite support from the political representation, but this is something what we are solving now at this moment, and we hope to get to some reasonable. Hope to have some reasonable outcome out of it. We are at the same time we are reforming the Czech Film Fund into an audiovisual fund. We will also include gaming into that. And we want to have the fund to be able to invest also in the television programming, which they have not been doing the last 20 or 25 years. They were only investing into the film, cinematographic production. And with the incentives, because of so big production in Czech Republic, at the moment we are kind of running out of money, and we are thinking to impose a cap, because only with two big series like Netflix or Amazon shooting in Czech Republic, we are basically running out of money out of the budget for incentives, and the system's getting stuck. And at the same time, again, as I said, it means big complication or big increase in the prices of the crews. Just a small notice. This is my company because I'm a producer as well, not only member of APA and CEPI, and we are producing more or less 200. We have produced more or less 250 hours of primetime fiction in the past 20 years. And I took the opportunity to put our just brand new logo, which we have approved last week. So you are my first testing public. Thank you.
For your presentation, just to start, and since there's no Portuguese presentations, let's say that we all also have incentives like our cash rebate that is very competitive in the European space, so hope that could continue, our cash rebate. So please come to Portugal and shoot with us. And then, well, as Susanna and Matilda were saying, we have common challenges, common problems, and as I said, in the beginning when we met, I think it is really important to share, to learn with each other, and of course to try to grow together. So I have some questions, and the first one, it is related with the pandemic effects, and it is the only question that I'm going to ask about this, and in a positive approach, which is, there are some changes that came to stay. So what are the good lessons from the pandemic, and what can we use to continue to grow? Alicia.
Thank you. So the first thing is when pandemic started, we all thought that the film production, theater production will stop, and we closed our business. So just to make a small note, non-production facility was closed during the pandemic, and we haven't been as busy as during the pandemic, to be honest. We haven't had this regulation to stop the shooting, so we just wait like months or two at the beginning of the pandemic to see how to react, how to organize the shooting days, and then after the June 2020, we just started business as usual. The one thing has changed is this theatrical release, so the revenue from the films are much lower than before. That's why we are more elastic to collaborate with streaming platforms, and that's why we've changed the windowing. However, I think, and this is a very good lesson for us, because it's always for me difficult to present some position as a president of the organization such as Philippe Alliance, because we have this whole issue on the European level. We have to see more broadly on our environment. But on the other hand, I'm a producer, I'm running a company as my colleague. So when when the day is come, it's always about, do I have the money to pay rent? Do I have the money to for my people, how to cash for the production? And that's why I have to decide and make some decision based on this simple fact, even though I'm not very, I know that this is not very perspective for me, but at the moment I have to worry about my business. So the thing is, we were discussing this release windowing to shorten the 75 days into 30 days because of the VOD platforms, and theaters were against for a very long time. And after 1.5 years of this, big discussion with all the stake players, they just changed it. Last month, that's all. I mean, they just changed it for 45 days. But we all think, as a producer, this is a temporary situation, and this is what I'm really happy to hear from our producers. So the lesson is that we have to react very flexible on the condition, and we all know that this is, the audiovisual sector working on a cycle. So as for now, there was a pandemic, and we have a cycle when the streaming platforms are quite heavy, so we need to react to be on the market. But in the next 1 year or 2 years, we change again and change our business model and our behavior. So that's the lesson we learned, and I'm pretty convinced that even with the producers, we are very pragmatic and not always want to see what is ahead of us. I'm convinced they are aware of that and they are very flexible, which is very refreshing.
Thank you. Zoran?
We didn't experience any bankruptcy, and we had lots of production that were paused or postponed, and there were losses. But I think what we learned is that we are on our own. The authors, the employees would not help us. The unions would not help us. They said, it's your responsibility as an employer. TV stations would not help us. They said, we buy a production, you deliver. We can accept delays, but we're not going to cover any losses. So I think what we learned was that we are on our own.
Okay, that's a negative point. So Anthony?
Actually quite different. We learned we're all together. And it was the first time that the funders, the unions, and ourselves all came together and said, right, we have a major problem to production, how are we going to fix it? And we came up with the COVID health and safety guidelines that allowed productions at all levels to keep going. And the second piece was around new work practices. So certain crew working from home, editors and so on and so forth, doing pre-production from home, which has actually led to job sharing and has led to new routes for certain people who weren't able to access pre-production before being able to access them now. So a bit different, but a bit more positive. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Philippe?
I think for me the biggest lecture or something that I use it as an opportunity to explain to the politicians, to the stakeholders in the industry, why we need secondary rights or some rights, because we are not able to survive if we are not producing, if we don't have this kind of rights. So for this industry, building a library and being able to sell, which actually there was a high demand of product at that time, and producers who had the rights, they were able to sell. So for me, this is one of the messages, we have to have the rights, some rights.
And also, how can we use that lessons in order to develop and to learn that best practice? I think that in Portugal also exists this union with different stakeholders. That could be a lesson for the future. And what about, well, Matilda also started to say that there are different viewing habits, not just because of the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, there are these huge different viewing habits. What happened and what are the trends in your own countries regarding the reception side? Philippe.
Sorry, well, the question was what was the strength?
The main differences in viewing habits. So from the reception side, not just because of the pandemic, we know that in the pandemic, well, there was an increase of viewing, but in some times and in some places it's just a momentary. But what are the main challenges with the reception side? So as a producers, have to think about our final consumer. So what are the main challenges?
I think we are quite happy that we have managed to produce quite fast in the Czech Republic, and we managed to keep the contact with the consumers. Of course, there was the problem that we couldn't have opened the cinemas, but people, whenever they were allowed, they were able to go to the cinema, or they returned. So I think for us it was the biggest challenge was just to start and continue production as soon as possible. I'm not sure if I understood well the question, because I didn't really hear. I have the echo and I wasn't sure, but sorry.
Anthony, perhaps you can pick up on that.
For us, it was technology with the because our public service media players do not have the level of investment that Netflix, Disney and so on have, which meant that the players don't work as well. So people can't access the content they wanted to watch during the pandemic and post, because the player doesn't work in a bad broadband area. If you've no internet, you can't watch it. And what that meant was that a lot of the content that was being produced by producers that was going onto the players could not be watched. And that's actually created a very negative perception for the public service media in our country. And one they can't fix because they need, hundreds of millions to bring them up to spec. And that's a big lesson for them as they try and get the younger audiences to watch their content. Yes. If they don't put the money in, they're going nowhere. And they're also losing a lot of respect among that audience segment. And that's a huge problem.
Zoran?
I'm not sure if it changed anything. We had a couple of feature film producers who were launching their film just as the lockdown came twice, and they lost a lot of money. But after the opening of the society, people have been going to the cinemas extremely well. I mean, a lot of movies have gone extremely well, and our percentage of watched, our ranking as a national films ranking in the movie theaters are extremely high. So I think at the moment we're still on this wave of I want to get out, I want to go to the movies, I want to go to football matches, I want to go to the music festivals. So at the moment we're still post-pandemic situation where people are extremely happy to consume cultural events, including movie theaters. And I think, during the pandemic, the streaming services, they were selling a lot. So, but I think this is very, we're still in a very unusual situation.
Yeah, so there's also a window. Let's see what is going to happen next. Alicia?
Well, there wouldn't be 6 streaming platforms in Poland if nothing has changed during 2 years, to be honest. So what do we know? A lot of people stays at home and watching streaming, that's all. We missed the 2024 target group in the theaters, but they weren't there before pandemic, but after pandemic they still don't there, and we missed the target group plus 45, and they were quite strong. I'm not sure if you're aware that in Poland, theaters were closed for more than a year. So, there was no theatrical release at all for more than a year. That's why so many changes appeared, which is not typical for each country in Europe. As I mentioned, we still are on the waiting process to understand how the habits change. Is it all about the genres, all the habits change, or maybe this is the path just to get used to the people to go to the theaters again? And as I told you, first quarter from 2022 in regard to admission was almost the same as in 2019, however not in the Polish films. So the domestic films were watched usually by the group of 45 plus. So I think it's there are 2 truths. So the truth is we need to wait a little bit longer to assess. So the autumn will be our moment to make an assessment, because the lineup is very good and attractive, because this is 1 year after they reopening the theaters, but also because I think something has changed, and I can see that for myself. So many times I just choose to stay at home and watch something on Netflix because I don't have the time to go to theaters, for example, like 4 hours, and that's all. I think there are some research, to be honest, but organized, prepared by the film distributor, the biggest film distributor in Poland, who has in catalog like 40 titles. And we see the viewers would like to see different movies. So, for example, horrors, blockbuster, obviously, but not Polish title, but not romantic comedy anymore. So we are not in the moment to make a clarification what has changed, but something definitely has changed. Yes. And if it's not, there won't be 6 new key players on the market in Poland, to be honest.
Of course. So linking to that, and you were talking about theaters, but Anthony was talking also about the public service media. And I was thinking about the free-to-air channels. And how do you perceive them? Are they still relevant in your own countries? For instance, in Portugal, they are still relevant. Of course, there are a decrease in ratings, we know, but they continue to play a key role in the media diet of the Portuguese. So we have 2 free-to-air channels, and they continues to, well, the supply and demand is very, and they continue to play a key role. What about in our own countries, and Anthony?
Is that a public service broadcaster?
I'm talking about
Free
not
TV.
public, but just a public and also commercial. We'll talk about the free-to-air channels. So I'm going to start with you, Anthony.
Yeah, of course. They're under serious threat, actually, in our country because of underfunding, lack of government support. And people aren't in the way that 20 years ago everybody paid what we call the TV license fee. The younger audiences aren't paying that. And RTE in particular, which is the English language main broadcaster, is in a very odd situation where it's over-serving the age group 55 plus with its content, underserving younger audiences, but it's the younger audiences that need to buy into the product to pay the license fee, but it's not getting them. However, from a production point of view, they are one of the biggest funders in the country, but also what we would perceive as they don't take risks. So the type of content that's being made by Irish producers for RTE is safe content, and that's not selling very well internationally, but so it's also...
And probably some horizontal grids.
Yeah, what it means is we don't, in terms of developing IP and developing formats, we don't do that. So we're kind of on a wheel and we're caught. And until RTE makes some bold decisions, that's just going to keep happening, which is it's a huge challenge in that sense.
Okay, Philippe?
I think they are, of course, they are still relevant, but I think they will have to restructure a bit their business because of the business model or the program, because I think the linear broadcasters are watched by the people who like passive watching. They like the people who like they switch it like on like a radio, or they switch it on like because they want to be served something, what they expect from this broadcaster to be served at certain moment. And I think they will go more and more into live programs like shows, talk show, this kind of entertainment. I think of course, there is always some space to do like high-end fiction for linear, and especially for public broadcasters, European co-productions, etc. But I think the fiction, it will be a bit more dominant in the streamers, and linear broadcasters will probably go more, actually closer to the actual situation, to the actual moments, to be in a live contact with the viewers.
Soren?
That is a very interesting question, because in Denmark, the 2 most relevant TV stations, the best TV stations, Danmarks Radio and TV2 Denmark, which is public service broadcasters. Danmarks Radio is financed over the tax. Until last year, it was financed by license fee. But I guess they realized that all the young people hate it. My children, they watch YouTube and TikTok and Netflix and football. They don't watch Danmarks Radio TV2. But they are extremely relevant, and they'll continue to be relevant, I think. So that's why I think it's an interesting question, because yes, Danmarks Radio is very free. Everyone can get it on their computer, and their player is really good. TV2 Denmark is also free, but you have to subscribe to some kind of cable package, but it's a free channel, really, based on commercials and subscriptions.
Yes.
But they're public service channels, and as I showed you, the media agreement sets out the conditions, and that's why they produce quality content, because they don't rely only on the commercial value of their products. So yes, the free TV stations in Denmark are very relevant, and I think they'll keep on being relevant for many years.
Thank you. Alicia?
Well, We have the public TV, and as you saw at the slides, the market share is dropping, which is related, in my opinion, both with political issues. So this is a governmental television, and young people don't watch it at all. But secondly, because young people and people from big cities don't watch TV at all. But on the other hand, this public TV has a big penetration of the country. So they still have like 10% of a share, and I think they will last. However, they concentrated on docu-soap production, to be honest, some live show, very specific content, not at all high TV drama or feature films or any more quality content. On the other hand, we have TVN and Polsat. Those are two free TV channels. This is commercial, those are commercial ones. And they are stable, but not as much relevant in the next 10 years, I would say. As you already saw, older people in smaller cities, they will stick with the free TV. But we are growing up, and we have like 40s or 50s. Our children are 5, 10, and they're not going to watch free TV at all. And those are not the big key players on the market in context of financing our production. It's a very rare situation we collaborate with TVN or Polsat or public TV. Because they have their own production facility, in-house production.
I was just checking the time. I was thinking now about the content and internationalization. So, is this a concern for you as a producers to internationalize your own content?
Alicia. It is advantage from our point of view, as all of the European producers would say, sitting on that place. On one hand, I mean, everything has the pluses and minuses if you're running a production company. So I think for you it's obvious that you cannot focus on one production profile. It's the most convenient to have a series, to have a feature film for Netflix or other streaming platforms, and independent production, because we have to divide the risk. So international production are good for us in context of know-how about gaining a new network. So we could have some service, for example, next year to finance our independent production.
Let me just add the co-production, which could be a strategy also for that.
It is very useful. For some, for example, we have those company in Poland, which are just picked up as one of the best 75 European independent producer yesterday by Screen Daily, Madans. Those is run by girls only, and they were focusing on the co-production from the beginning 15 years ago, and this is the only one kind of production they made. This year they produce first feature film domestic for them own. So, and the profile of the company gains like 15 or 20 titles. You've already heard about them because those are the top titles, European titles. But this is the only one company who choose the path. Usually we choose, this combining the business model. And obviously, co-production and also inbound production are profitable. It was profitable because our costs in Poland were pretty low in compare with the others. So we earn a lot of money on such a production. It has changed, as you already had. And in Poland, which is very funny, and I'm really starting to be reflecting how we do that. Because first of all, for example, Kipa is not financing by the money from residuals. We have to finance from the members fee, and I have to find like 100, 200 euros on the market each year. And secondly, we do not have producer's fee. When we're doing the feature film with PFI, we do not have contingency, and we do not have, it's really hard to include your remuneration as eligible costs in the production. So the question is why we do that, because if you have no producer's fee, so for example, markup like 7 or 10% is ridiculous, and it is. That's why, and this is the additional thing, we collaborate with streaming platforms or with broadcasters. Broadcasters always offer 7% as a markup for us. And this is something which is very profitable in co-production, because our partners always include us amongst the producer's fee and also remuneration. So it's, it's very useful.
Anthony?
Yeah, internationalization is something we talk about every day because our producers view internationalization of their content and the formats as the only way they're going to grow as a company, because the Irish market is very, very static because you only have so many funders and so many eyes. And if they can get their content either onto international players, or if they can get their formats licensed by other broadcasters, production companies, they can start growing in their company more and more. So internationalization to us is all about producing companies at scale that can compete at a worldwide market, so that you're not in a situation where you've got 460 hours of content in RTE every year, but only 10 hours of that is broadcast elsewhere. So that's kind of where we would see the growth potential of it.
Philippe?
No, of course, it's a great users. Same as Anthony says, the only way to make interesting money for the producer is to sell it out abroad, to try to sell globally. But there is also a problem of the content itself, because the content for international market has to be a bit different than for a local market. And then, your financing in a local market might collapse, or might be less, or might not exist. So it's a very, let's say, fragile process to convince also the broadcasters that they have to do something which is not only local, but has to be international. And it's also about the difference of the topics. For international market, you need like strong topics, strong dramas, strong stories. For local market, you need a little bit more something for maybe going towards like a humor or melodrama for local viewers. So it's all the time is there it's a catch-22 question to how to solve it. But of course, it's definitely what we would like to do as producers. And
Zoran?
Well, if I understand your question right, I think there are two answers to it, because the co-production side, as we are a country with 5.8 million people, probably a bit more than 6 million people in the world understands and speaks Danish. So we've always been very open towards co-productions and the international cooperation. So that's not new. If you look at our platforms, that the streaming services buying, fully financing and buying productions in Denmark, now it's getting more difficult to answer, because 3 years ago, all the producers said, we got free hands, we can do whatever we want. They ask us if we want to produce, they give us the money, and they walk out the door, and they come back and get the production, and we're free to do whatever we want. But I think it's getting more and more tight. They're trying to control more and more, and I think, if you watch the series Kamikaze at HBO,
Yes.
There's a main character, she's got 3 friends. She's got one girlfriend who is completely Danish, blonde, looks and acts completely Danish. She's got a male friend, he's gay, and then she's got another girlfriend who's black, who's colored. I think she's Indian maybe. But I'm pretty sure that's not a coincidence, that, diversity and they can't smoke because the Americans don't like people smoking. I'm pretty sure that kind of internationalization of the productions, I'm not sure that's a good thing. That you have to follow certain rules by the customer.
Of course. Well, we are on time. I add some questions regarding the sensitive topics like IP, copyrights, audiovisual media service directive, but I'm just going to ask a final question, a positive one, I hope, I don't know, which is, how do you define in 2 words your own audiovisual sector, Philippe? Just 2 words.
Our own audiovisual sector?
Yes.
Interesting question. Challenged, with future.
Okay, that's more than
Like
2
challenge
words.
now
I
with
accept
a
it.
promising future.
Okay, Anthony?
Constantly changing.
Okay, constantly change. 2 words. Yes, Zoran?
Well, imploding or panicking.
I was hoping that. That's why I said positive or negative questions. And Alicia?
Emerging and ready for everything.
Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you all. Now, in APIT's name, I'm going to invite you all to lunch, and we'll come back at 3 p.m. So thank you, and thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
After a day.
Yeah. Yeah.